Conservative parties in the country, and both of them avoiding what is really the key issue here. And the key issue is a woman's right to control her own body. And the men don't want to face up to that. I've really been fascinated listening to this discussion, because at one stage we're hearing the Constitution belongs to the people and it's up to the people to decide what goes in and out of that Constitution. Does it ever cross your mind that our bodies belong to us as women and that it's up to us to decide what we do with our bodies? Does that not cause some kind of a conflict for you? And therefore it's interesting that the side of the House, if you like, the women who are pro-choice in the House, who have the most to lose if a referendum on repealing the 8 actually falls and doesn't repeal the 8, are the ones who are advocating it the most. And the reason we're advocating it the most, because we've lived most of our adult lives without the right to control our own bodies. We have lived with sisters, daughters, cousins and friends and all women across society who have been denied that right, and many of whom, very, very many of whom, 12 a day in fact, have been forced to leave the state to procure abortions elsewhere. People are now facing the possibility of 14 years in prison for attempting to procure an abortion. That's what the law states that was passed in this House last year. It's draconian, and the only way to end it is to move to a situation where the people whom you refer to, Taoiseach, to whom the Constitution belongs, make the decision. If the Constitution belongs to the people, then let them decide and give them a choice to have a referendum calling for repeal the 8th. 33 years of my adult life I've lived with this amendment to the Constitution, as have other people, and indeed lots of men in this country who are very dissatisfied with it. Is it not about time, given all the stats and all of the polling that you see, that you just put the referendum? You don't have to decide what questions asked, other than, do you want to repeal the 8th Amendment of the Constitution? That's simple. Simple question. And if the people say, no, we don't, then we're stuck with that decision. If the people say, yes, we do, then there are consequences, and we deal with the consequences then. I want to put a case to you, Taoiseach, because you say there are a number of court cases that have looked at this issue and that have come up with various ways of looking at it and nuances to it. All of those court cases emanated from crises for women. The X case, the Y case and other cases, all of them emanated from serious crises in women's lives. And if there are to be more crises in women's lives, and there will be, because of this amendment to the Constitution, how do you deal with, for example, emergency situations? I want to put this, and it's not a facile question. There's been lots of word bandied about here about whether it's facile, traumatic or sensitive. The Olympic Games are going to take place in South America this year. The World Health Organization has just ruled that they are not going to postpone them because of the Zika virus. Now, what is the advice that the Bolivian government are currently given to the population, the women population of that country, the Brazilian government? And that is not to get pregnant. What do you say to sportswomen and participants and tourists who want to go to Bolivia from Ireland, citizens of this country who want to go to Bolivia or to Brazil from Ireland for the Olympic Games? Is your advice and the advice of Charlie Flanagan going to be, don't get pregnant? Because if they get pregnant when they're over there and in danger of having a deformed fetal abnormality, are they then going to come back to this country to be told, no, you can't have medical treatment for that in this country? So tell us what advice you're going to give to women, both the participants in the Games and those who want to attend them, because it's very important. And while that amendment remains enshrined in our constitutions, situations like this, and they will be repeated, are going to be continually faced by women in this country, whether they're Irish citizens or not. I'd like to ask you to answer that question. And just to say to you that the Citizens' Assembly you talk about, it all sounds very nice, and we're going to pick the people, and of course they'll have to be gender balanced and age balanced. Who's going to pick them? You? Fine Gael? the people, the independents who supported you in government, who are against women having the right to choose? Who's going to choose the citizens who will actually make the decision that will come back to this House with a recommendation? The only real decision that can be made is by giving people a vote in it and putting the referendum to the people. And what are you afraid of? What are the people who are against this referendum afraid of? That the people might actually decide, yes, after 33 years, we do find that this 8th Amendment is both problematic, discriminatory and denies women their basic rights. But will you please answer the specific question on how you're going to advise our citizens who may attend the Olympic Games in the autumn?
Smith. Not for me to dispense advice as to whether people should go to Brazil or not. The Zika virus is there whether the Olympic Games take place or not. Not because of the Olympic Games. People may wish to go on business or on holidays to a country in South America where the Zika virus applies. It's not because of the Olympic Games. That's a choice they've got to make themselves. You're asking me what happens if they come back, if they go to Brazil, and they become pregnant in Brazil? The question you asked me was about the Olympic Games and what advice I should give them. The Zika virus was there long before.
I think maybe we might stick to the question.
The Zika virus was there long before the Olympic Games and will be there long after the Olympic Games. Whether people travel to Brazil or not, I'm not qualified medically to give them advice on the extent or otherwise of the Zika virus and that situation. But I think you make a very strong case. But the fact of the matter is that in 1983, the 8th Amendment was introduced into the Bunnacht na hÉireann, the Irish Constitution, by the Irish people. And that was a guarantee to the right to life of the unborn. There were 3 referenda after that. And in each case, in each of those referenda by the people, not just by any parties, the people decided to keep that reference in the Constitution. The insertion into the Constitution of the 8th Amendment guaranteeing the right to life of the unborn was endorsed by the people, interpreted by the Supreme Court. We legislated for that in respect of the Protection of Life Bill in the period of the last government. It's not just a case then of saying take it out and repeal it. In order, as you're aware, to change the Constitution, to insert anything into the Constitution, you have to have the approval of the people. So what question do you want to ask them? They've been asked this question before, both in respect of the removal of suicide as an area to narrow the 8th Amendment, and they rejected that. And there were other referenda on the question of abortion. So I think it's perfectly in order to consult with a broad range of people. They're not selected by any party in here. They're not selected by a polling company just to say the percentage of polls are up or down. They're selected on the basis of objectively picking men and women in areas around the country in a very professional basis. You put together a citizens' assembly and say, I want you to reflect on this question here and all the matters that arise from it. And that will come back into this assembly where the people have elected different party representatives and those who do not represent any party to deal with the question. They don't have to accept the recommendation of the Citizens' Assembly, but if you want to have an analysis of what you might be able to do in respect of the 8th Amendment, it is in here it's eventually going to have to be decided. You're going to have a vote on that if you have to have a bill for a referendum. Because at the end of the day, the political process here, the people who are elected are going to have to make a decision whether you have a bill to have a referendum to ask the people that question or not. So it's not just as simple as saying repeal the 8th as the deputy says. And obviously, yes, we speak here as party leaders, and clearly men no more than women have an interest in the Constitution, but you rightly point out the difficulties and the fact that in the case of fatal fetal abnormalities, it is women who have to put up with the consequences of that. and obviously their partners or their husbands have an interest, have an interest and have expressed so. So if you change the Constitution, to add to it or to amend it, you can only do it with the consent of the people.
A series of supplementaries, and then I'll go back to the Taoiseach. Deputy Adams had indicated first, and then I'll come to you, Deputy Carpenter.
First of all, there's a need for comprehensive constitutional reform. We